how did the Hawkmoon novels by Michael Moorcock, particularly the first 3 or 4 books in that cycle, The History of the Runestaff, influenced the early days of Dungeons and Dragons? The Appendix N chats talk about how the books that Gary Gygax, creator of Dungeons and Dragons, particularly first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, how various bits of fiction that he cited influenced his work. And he cites Moorcock, he cites a few different series by Moorcock, including Hawkmoon, The History of the Runestaff. And he talks about particularly the first 3 novels, but this compilation has all 4 of that cycle. And I can think of 3 ways from having reflected on it and gone through it. There, one is kind of generic, and 2 are perhaps more specific, that you could cite particular points. So one's general, thematic, stylistic, 2 are specific. The first is the generic thing, which is that this is kind of secretly a Dying Earth novel. This is set in the far future after some apocalypse. There's ruins of technological masterpieces. It's not necessarily as obviously doom as in terms of the world's ending or going to end, the best is past us, as The Dying Earth by Jack Vance or other key Dying Earth books. But some of the tone and theme and landscape is very similar to those. And it's something that obviously influenced Gygax. If you look at Greyhawk as a setting in general, the hints of apocalypse in that, and also just some of the specific adventures, most famously, and this one is only adjacent really to the Dying Earth theme, but Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, which has an alien spaceship in it. And so the sense that Greyhawk may be part of a wider and more technologically advanced universe and is in some way a technological backwater, or perhaps even a post-apocalyptic backwater. And so Moorcock could well be an influence there with his Baroque pseudo-Dying Earth landscapes. More specifically, the 2 things I can think of, one is the magic items. The 4 books in this cycle are named after magic items. They are named after the Jewel in the Skull, which is a jewel that can be put in someone's skull to control them, and as a sort of kill switch, you turn it on and the magic and it kills the person, and you can observe what they see through it. The Mad God's Amulet, which is just an amulet which gives you power. The Sword of the Dawn, which is a sword which summons a legion of warriors to come and help you, ghostly warriors. And the Runestaff, a strange, providential, incredibly powerful object. So, yeah, that seems like a reasonable inference to say that's an influence. There are other early, particularly sword and sorcery books with magical items and a sense that there's all these crazy things out in the world you can play with and get as a hero. But here the idea there are artifact type magic items of great power which a hero will take on his great journey. As much as there is a grimy, thiefy element to the Gygaxian D&D, it's not wholly that. And the idea of these epic magic items which Hawkmoon uses are very much, I think, in line with that. The other specific that came to my mind, and I might be missing deeper things, but the other specific is a big Moorcockian theme of law versus chaos. I've talked before how pretty clearly Gygax draws the law versus chaos dichotomy of original D&D and basic D&D, where law is good and chaos is evil. He draws that from Paul Anderson in 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. But Moorcock also is the other author in that era who talks explicitly in terms of law versus chaos as the great debate, and he has more complicated views than Anderson. A big thing is that, and this comes out in Hawkmoon, is the idea that balance is key and justice is something which is neither law nor chaos. You only ever get small amounts of justice out of hard work balancing these things. And that's not what you get immediately in earliest D&D, but it's hard not to see that as part of what's going into Gygax choosing to use law versus chaos. It's also, I think, fair to say that some of those ideas, particularly by first edition, where neutral is no longer simply a middle point between the two, but an idea of balance may well, and that neither too much law nor too much chaos is good, comes out in the ninefold alignment system in first edition. And though there are other influences, and Gygax does talk about why he's done what he's done in a Dragon article, I think, again, it's hard not to see this sort of material as influencing that he ended up saying, oh, actually, maybe I've come up with a simplistic alignment spectrum and I should have something more complex. Some of those things are hard to know, in the end. I don't think he ever says Hawkmoon is why I didn't like this, or Elric or Corum, the other Moorcock books he cites, I think. But nonetheless, I think there's something to say that this is a book where that particular discussion about balance is had out loud, more so than elsewhere, and I wonder whether that is not a background influence on the way that law versus chaos developed. Certainly it's a foreground influence. It's one of the places that he is going to have been reading about law versus chaos, but I wonder whether Hawkmoon specifically is not a background influence on true neutral balance and a more nuanced, complicated view of the law versus chaos dichotomy. Anyway, are there any other things from the Hawkmoon books you know of that you think are influences on D&D? Or generally speaking, I mean, I will get to Elric eventually, but any other more Moorcockian influences that you think are worth talking about? Tell me in the comments. Till next time.